And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana University basketball news and discussion. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Podcast on the Brink is a joint production of the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. For complete coverage of IU basketball, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com.
Hoosier fans, it's Indiana basketball time. IU basketball mini-series tickets are now available in 6-game or 3-game ticket packages, as well as individual games. This is your chance to check out the Hoosiers inside beautiful Simon Scott Assembly Hall. For more information, call or text 812-855-4006 or visit iuhoosiers.com. Go IU.
On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, Alex Bozich is back, and the mailbag is back, but with a little bit of a twist this week, as instead of me reading out your questions, you had the chance to submit your questions via a voicemail. Well, some of you did anyway. Those who are members of the Inside the Hall Premium Forum, which you can join at forum.insidethehall.com, had the opportunity to submit a voicemail to us with their questions. 5 of you did, and so we're going to answer all of those questions, along with just talk a little bit about Hoosier Hysteria, practice starting, some of the latest news and notes going on with Indiana basketball. All of that coming on this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink. Before we get to that, though, let's talk a little bit more about tickets, because, look, you don't need a ticket this weekend to go to Hoosier Hysteria. Your ticket is a canned good, so make sure that you bring that in. But if you want to see the rest of the action this season, if you want to see Romeo Langford play in person in the Cream and Crimson, if you want to catch Juwan Morgan during his final season as a Hoosier, if you want to see the other freshmen, if you want to see Evan Fitzner not miss a three all season long, not to put any pressure on you or anything, Evan, you're going to need to get tickets. And that means you're going to need to get tickets to Simon Scott Assembly Hall or to one of the road venues Indiana will be playing in. And a great place to do that is SeatGeek. So when you go to SeatGeek, they really have kind of designed everything to make your ticket buying experience easier than ever. And so what they do is they search multiple ticket sites, they grade every ticket based on value, and that helps you identify the best seats for the money that you can spend. So you kind of fit your budget and get the best seat available. And the other thing is they fully guarantee every single purchase. So you can go on there, you can surf and browse with confidence, you can purchase with confidence, which, those are 2 of the reasons why I use SeatGeek. There are other reasons, but I have SeatGeek on my phone. I recommend that you do the same. And really, it's not just for IU basketball tickets, but IU football tickets. If you want to go see a Pacers game and watch Victor play, you want to go to a Colts game, go to a concert, anything that you want to do live event-wise, SeatGeek is going to have you covered. And here's the great thing. Because you are a Podcast on the Brink listener, you actually get $20 back after your first purchase. So just download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K. That's promo code BRINK, and you'll get $20 off of your first SeatGeek purchase. SeatGeek. Life's an event. We have the tickets. And now, it's time for a little Podcast on the Brink mailbag with me and Alex. Here we go. Let's talk some IU basketball. Alex, welcome back. We missed you last week, but I thought Jeremy Gray stepped in and was an able replacement for you, giving us some good insight on Hoosier Hysteria and the athletic program at large and the excitement around the basketball program. So it's always great to talk to him, but it's always great to have you back.
Yeah, thank you. I took a little time off to get ready for the season, but happy to be back. And as you mentioned, Jeremy's always a lot of fun to have on the show, and his enthusiasm for IU athletics is unmatched.
See, you've been at this longer than me. Is that what I should have done? Should I have been taking time off prior to the season rather than like ramping up and testing out doing these daily podcasts over at the Assembly Call?
Well,
am I going to burn myself out by January?
It was my 10-year wedding anniversary, so I figured it was a good occasion to get away for a couple of days with my wife, and the season's going to start, and I'll be gone a lot, so got to pick your spots, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. All right, so we've got a fun episode. We're doing a mailbag, and as I mentioned in the introduction, it's a little bit of a different mailbag. We actually set up a voicemail, a Google Voice account, so that people can leave us voice messages. Right now, we're only doing that for premium forum members. If we decide to open that up later, then we'll, announce the phone number and all of that stuff. But for premium forum members, they can submit their voice messages. So we've got 5 really good questions that we'll get to here in a minute. But before we do that, I just want to cover a couple of topics with you real quick, Alex. And in fact, some news broke 5 minutes before we started recording. Not surprising news, but we did get confirmation of Keion Brooks' final 6. And it's pretty much what everybody expected that it would be. Indiana was on there, which makes sense since he's going to be at Hoosier Hysteria, along with Kentucky, UCLA, Purdue, Michigan State, and North Carolina. Any reaction to that other than just kind of nodding because that's what was expected?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what was expected. I think it was maybe Purdue was one of the one some people thought might not be on. If I'm looking at the list objectively and kind of coming up with my high level thoughts of which schools actually have a chance to land him, and obviously all 6 I guess do to some degree, otherwise they wouldn't be on the list. But the top 4, and this is my opinion, are Indiana, North Carolina, Kentucky, and Michigan State. Though if he doesn't end up at one of those 4, I'll be pretty surprised. So we'll see. Obviously, this weekend is critical, I think, for a lot of reasons for both him and Trace Jackson Davis. Although I think most people believe that Trace Jackson Davis committing to IU is a foregone conclusion. There's not that same level of confidence with Keion Brooks, but no real surprises with the final 6, and we'll see what materializes after this weekend. I'll be interested to see if he's actually going to sign in the fall or take this thing to the spring, because if he takes it to the spring, it's not going to be obviously the kind of the hype with that we saw with Romeo, but it's a long time away, obviously at least 6 more months of recruiting. So it's definitely one of those things. I think as a college coach, when you recruit a kid for a long time and you have a chance to get him in the fall, you definitely want to try to get it done, because a lot of things can happen over the course of a season. And then if it goes to the spring, you never know if other schools are going to be able to get involved. So it's definitely something that I think most of the schools involved probably want to have happen sooner rather than later.
And that's what makes this weekend so important. Keion will be on campus. Trace Jackson Davis will be on campus, and they're going to be here for Hoosier Hysteria. This will be their official visit. So this is Indiana's biggest chance to make a huge impression. Indiana fans' biggest chance to make a huge impression if, the Hoosier Hysteria setup is like last year, where they bring the players across the court, which I would assume that they would do again. So it's a real big opportunity. And we're going to talk in the answers to one of the questions coming up about what kind of things go on during these official visits and what Archie and his staff will be doing, what they'll be pitching to these guys. Before we get into some of those specific topics about Hoosier Hysteria, though, reflecting back on last week's conversation with Jeremy Gray, it seemed clear, both in what he said and also kind of reading between the lines a little bit, and then just some other comments that have been made, that Indiana really seems to be kind of up in the ante this year with Hoosier Hysteria, that, the budget's going to be bigger, there may be going to be some more bells and whistles. We don't know exactly what those are going to be, but it certainly sounds like there's even more emphasis on the event, and maybe, Archie having a bit more of an opportunity to put it, more of his own imprint on it. What are, just generally speaking, what are you expecting from Hoosier Hysteria in terms of attendance and excitement and enthusiasm? And is there anything specific that you're hoping to see, looking to see, that you've heard about kind of in advance of the event on Saturday?
In terms of crowd, I would expect that this is going to be, since I've been on the beat covering the team, this is probably going to be the most well attended Hoosier Hysteria, if not maybe second behind the 2012-13 season when Indiana went in number 1. I mean, I think that one, I don't know that it was completely full, but they dipped well into the balcony, and I think with Romeo and just the excitement for the guys who have returned to the program, and the fact that Indiana is being talked about as a team that could potentially win the Big Ten this year, I think you're going to see a strong showing of fans. And I also think that the time to have the event at 4 in the afternoon, I think was a smart thing because it allows people who are coming from different parts of the state, a better opportunity maybe to come in and catch the event. Because, if you're driving back to Fort Wayne afterwards, or you're driving back to Evansville, or you're driving back to New Albany, or wherever you may be coming from, and it ends at 6 or 6:30, you still get home at a decent time. Whereas, recent memory, it's always been later, and you'd have to get a hotel room or get home really late, and that's often the case during the season for a game. But for an event like Hoosier Hysteria, where you kind of want to have the best turnout possible, and you're not selling tickets, I think it's a smart thing to have it in the afternoon, to have it as accessible as possible for people to attend. So I think that's going to actually have a positive impact on attendance. That remains to be seen. That's just kind of my prediction. In terms of bells and whistles, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of leaks as to what to expect, but just listening to what Jeremy had to say last week, I think Indiana fans should be excited. The fact that they're going to kind of spruce up the event maybe and put some more resources into it. I think one of the biggest complaints that I've had over the years of Hoosier Hysteria is that it seemed to be almost the same exact thing every year. And I think anything you can do to make it different, put a new twist on it, maybe introduce some new things, I think kind of give it a fresh coat of paint, so to speak, is going to be a positive. Recruits and also fans don't want to see the same thing every year. So anything you can kind of do to differentiate yourself from other programs and showcase the program wouldn't be a bad thing. I don't think, to have some maybe former Hoosiers in attendance as well, if that's possible. So that's another thing I'll be interested to see, especially with Victor Oladipo right up the road in Indianapolis. That'd be cool to see him there.
Yeah, boy, it sure would. Two other things on the start time that I think are interesting. One, the fact that it coincides with the football game, not the official event, but the football game will be going on, so that people who go in early will kind of have something to do and watch, because they'll be showing the football game. That's, I think, Jeremy referred to it as, manna from heaven with the scheduling. I think that's kind of a nice little bonus. And I'd say the other thing, and you talked about people who were driving in. I think the other thing that's really nice about having it earlier is I think it makes it easier for people to come and bring their kids. Because it's earlier, and you're not maybe having to keep that kid up until 10, 11, 12 at night. And so maybe you don't even, bring your kid, because, and Jeremy mentioned this on the episode as well, this is one of the events that, people can go to without having season tickets. So you get a lot of people who maybe aren't in the arena normally. And if you can bring your kids and they get to be there with 15,000, 16,000, 17,000 people going crazy, and they get to see Romeo and they get to watch dunks and threes or whatever ends up happening, those are like emotional events that can really help lock in young fans. And so I think having it at a time that is more conducive to parents bringing their kids is just a smart kind of long-term big picture thing for the program. And, because anything that you can do with young fans to give them those just really indelible experiences, I think is good. And you get those, kids locked into being IU fans. And so I think that's good too. Will we see more kids there with the families? Who knows? But I would say, you're the father of a couple of kids. I have a young daughter myself. It would certainly make it a lot easier to bring them with it being earlier than if it was late at night.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've heard from actually quite a few people this week that have talked about taking their kids up that normally wouldn't with younger kids. It's, as you know, a challenge. You keep them up to midnight one night, kind of could mess up their schedule for the next couple of days. So being able to do that, I think, is just a positive thing, as you mentioned.
All right. You ready to answer some questions?
Yeah, I'm excited about this format. I know we've been wanting to try it for a couple of months now, and there's a couple other podcasts I listen to that do something similar. So props to you for being the production brains behind this and getting it all set up, and looking forward to it. I think it's it's one thing to kind of read a question, right, and we maybe put your own spin on it, but we actually are going to go straight to the listeners here this week and hear their voices and answer their questions. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, straight to the sources. Okay, here we go. Here is question number 1. This is from Swish.
Hi, Jerod and Alex. This question is from Swish of the Premium Forum. After much anticipation, Hoosier Hysteria is upon us, and obviously all eyes will be on Romeo. But there's so much to see with all the freshmen coming in, Evan Fitzner. Who is the one individual that you are most excited to see beyond Romeo and why. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the question, Swish. Romeo, the clear, obvious answer there. I think it's always most exciting at Hoosier Hysteria to see the freshmen for the first time, to see them in the cream and crimson. We've gotten used to seeing them in their, their grassroots uniforms and in their maybe Indiana All-Star uniforms, their high school uniforms. So to see them out there, to kind of see what they can do in that kind of environment is always exciting. But, I think the first two guys that jumped out to me thinking about this question were actually not freshmen. One is Evan Fitzner. He's obviously a newcomer, so, there's still kind of that novelty factor with him, but just seeing him, and if there's a 3-point contest, seeing how he does in that, because some of the videos that we've seen of him shooting, some of the reports that we've heard of him shooting have been just absolutely glowing. And so it'd be really good to see him, and being there in person, because I'm going to be there in person, being able to see how big he is. He's 6'10", how big does he look? And then for me, the other guy is Juwan Morgan. I know that this will be, this is his 4th year, so there's not a whole lot of novelty there, but I'm really interested to see if there's any change in his demeanor. He assumed the leadership role last year, although I think it, maybe took him a little bit into the season to truly grasp it. And I'm just wondering if there will be a different vibe about him, now that this is clearly his team. I mean, this is his last go around at Hoosier Hysteria, and how he's interacting with the younger guys, how he interacts with Romeo, those kind of things. So to me, those are going to be two guys, in addition to the freshman, in addition to Romeo, that I'm really going to be looking for. How about for you, Alex? Who other than Romeo stands out in terms of individuals you want to see?
Yeah, because I look at Hoosier Hysteria as a night where we shouldn't draw too many big conclusions. And I agree with a lot of things. I want to see during the scrimmage a lot of the things you mentioned, but I want to see Justin Smith, because he, this offseason, set a max vertical record, I think, for the program, 48 inches. I don't believe he won the dunk contest last year. And if they have a dunk contest again this year, I want to see just how big of a leap he's taken, no pun intended, athletically, right? I want to see just kind of what this offseason hype has been about, because I think there's a lot of people around the program, those who follow the program closely, that think that Justin Smith is going to be a breakout guy. And this is our first real look at him on the court. I know he's done a lot of things with his body, getting in better shape this offseason. I know he's worked on ball handling, and his athleticism has never been a question. And so he's the guy who I point to and say, on a night where guys can just get out there and have fun and showcase their raw athleticism, Justin Smith is the guy who I have circled to watch on Saturday, and just see, if do we get the feeling after watching him Saturday that this is going to be the guy that can break out and maybe be that, third guy behind Juwan and Romeo.
A couple other guys, Jake Forrester is another guy who stands out to me, and I'm reflecting on what Jeremy Gray said in last week's episode, just about his attitude, his enthusiasm, that IU fans are really going to like him, invoke the name of AJ Moye. Sort of interesting to see him, out there in an IU uniform for the first time. And I know that the obvious answer is Romeo, and, Swish said beyond Romeo. But I want to ask you, Alex, I mean, you've, being from New Albany, I mean, you saw a ton of Romeo's games. You've seen this guy grow up. Is there anything that you're looking to kind of watch at Hoosier Hysteria about him, about his demeanor, or how he handles any certain elements of it? I mean, it's not like, he's used to spectacle. He's used to having attention on him. So I don't think, it's going to be some kind of moment that he's not ready for. But is there any part of it that you're looking to see how he responds to?
Yeah, I just kind of want to see how he enjoys himself, right? Because he's been coveted for so long by these schools. He's heard all these recruiting pitches everywhere he has gone the last couple of years, whether it be Indiana, whether it be Louisville, whether it be Kentucky, whether it be other schools that he visited, North Carolina, UCLA. It's been, we want you, Romeo. We want you to come here. And everyone telling him what he wants to, what they think he wants to hear. Now he's a part of the program. I just want to see him go out there and have fun, enjoy himself. He's going to, I think in a lot of ways, look a lot more relaxed than we ever saw him. He wasn't a guy who ever drew attention to himself with what he did on the court. I don't think he's going to do anything to draw attention to himself at Hoosier Hysteria other than play hard in the scrimmage and show off his natural ability. But I just want to see how he soaks up the moment. I think it's probably going to be, obviously, we don't know what happens after the 1 year, but his only chance to experience something like this. So I just want to see him go out, have fun, enjoy himself. And he's obviously going to feel the love from the fans. And I think he's going to be really appreciative of the reception that he receives.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Here we go. This is from Tommy.
Hey, Alex and Jerod. This is Tommy Morrison, Premium Forum member. I live in Lexington, Kentucky. I just had a question regarding recruit official visits to Bloomington. We always seem to hear great reports of Archie and how he structures his official visits and how he sells the program. I was wondering if you had any information on how those visits usually go. What is Archie doing? What is the coaching staff doing? And why is he so successful when he gets recruits on campus? Love the show. Thanks, guys.
So I know the audio wasn't perfect in that one, but Tommy essentially wants to know about official visits and what Archie's doing. Why has Indiana been so successful? And, it's been pretty impressive so far with Archie Miller that when he has really zeroed in on recruits and, Indiana's, he's had a pretty good kind of winning percentage, pretty good batting average so far, not losing out on many of those guys. I want to preface this by saying, because I think you'll be able to get into some of the specifics, but an official visit is a full weekend sales pitch for the school. Archie and the staff are trying to put their best foot forward for, why this program is worth coming to, why it's a good fit for the player, why the parent should trust their son with these coaches at this school. And so, in anything with sales, any type of pitch, what you don't want is downtime. You want it to be organized. You want there to be a plan. You want it to be really hitting the target's hot spots in a sense, the stuff that really speaks to them. And so without knowing any specifics about any official visit that has gone on, if I had to guess why Archie and the staff are really good at this, it's because we know how organized they are, and we know how much of a plan they have for everything from scheduling to player development to, tracking production and practice. So my guess is that they do the exact same thing on an official visit. And I have to think that speaks, both to the emotional part and the logical part of the minds and hearts of the players and the parents that they are hosting on these official visits. And when you do that, you're going to have a pretty successful sales pitch. So that would kind of be my hypothesis, I guess. Alex, do you think that there's something to that? And do you know any of the specifics that they're doing to really sell these guys?
The only thing I can tell you in terms of behind the scenes is when you talk to a recruit after they go on their visit, what they tell you, right? Because nobody else is there behind the walls other than the coaches and the staff members, and they're not allowed to talk about that publicly. So the information that you get is coming from the recruit to the recruits' families. And I go back to a conversation that I had recently with Armand Franklin, where he said something very interesting to me, right? He said that Archie's not, and I'm paraphrasing here, you can go back and look at the quotes, so I don't want to attribute these as direct quotes, but paraphrasing. He said, he's not the kind of guy that you get the I guess, lovey, whatever feeling with, but
warm and
he's a straight, warm and fuzzy, something like that. But he's straightforward, and Franklin specifically pointed out that he got to spend time with not only Archie, but his family to get to know them. And that's not something that I think fans have seen with Archie. He's very businesslike in his approach, but that tells me that he is connecting with these recruits on more than just the level of basketball. He's getting to know their families. He's getting to, build the relationships necessary to land recruits. And I think another key point in recruiting for any program is getting to know the family and the kid on a level to where what they want to see on their visit, right? Because different kids want to be recruited in different ways. Some kids want probably fake newspapers or fake magazines with them on the cover saying that they cut down the nets. Other guys want to see examples of player development and what you can do for them. Some guys want to see academics. Kind of getting to know each kid on a level to where you can kind of build your visit around their visit around what they want to see, I think is crucial. Because if you have a kid on a visit and you kind of do the wrong things in terms of showing them things that maybe they're not interested in, you don't keep their attention. You mentioned the downtime. You got to have it organized and planned out. And I think people probably think that not a whole lot goes into these sometimes. But if I had to guess, there's probably been meetings for weeks, if not months, looking forward to this weekend, right?
Yep.
What are we going to do for, Trace Jackson Davis in terms of what do we want to show him specifically when he's on his visit? What do we want to show Keion Brooks? And I think if you are doing a good job recruiting a kid, you have the relationship to where what's the best thing to show them, and that's kind of speaks to the organization. But in terms of what goes on behind closed doors, all we have to go by really is what the recruit tells us afterwards. The staff can't really talk about that, but I think it's what you want to do is give them the best in-depth glimpse of inside the program and build it specifically around that kid, right? You don't want to do a cookie cutter approach where every kid's seeing the same thing on their visit, because these kids know each other through AAU circles. They talk, they know. And if you're telling every kid the same thing, if you're showing every kid the same thing, if you're pitching every kid the same way, eventually word gets around. And so you got to build it around each kid. And I think that's what probably is being very, is helping Indiana be very successful up to this point.
A few other things we should mention. Official visits, the university can foot the bill for everything. So that means a lot of meals. So the fine cuisine in Bloomington can really shine, especially the Tudor room. So that's one thing. Something else that we should mention is Cliff Marshall and the impact that he probably has on some of these visits, because I think, we often hear guys talk about, being able to visit with Cliff and kind of hear, different plans he would have and kind of paint the picture for how he'll develop their bodies. And it can't hurt that I'm sure he's able to name drop, Luke Kuechly and AJ Green and some of the professional athletes that he's worked with. So that's certainly helpful. And I'll tell you, the other thing that needs to be mentioned are the current players, because, a lot of the time is spent with the current players, whether it's at practice. Every player has a host for, when they're on their recruiting visit. And so it's very important that you match up the recruit with a host that kind of shares their personality, where they're not going to clash. And that, recruit, then, probably going to go out and show them what campus life is like. And so that part of the quote unquote presentation needs to be a fit as well. And so it's not just, sitting in a room with Archie and looking at film and talking about the vision or, meeting the families. There's other people that are involved here. And so I think, so you got to kind of have a plan that really includes all of those parts and pieces, and all of those parts and pieces have to be functioning well. And I think that, as you get the culture going, as Archie gets this culture built, it's going to be so much easier for him to attract the kind of guys that he wants, because those will be the kind of guys who are already in the program that he's bringing guys in and setting them up on, as, to be their host for the official visits. And that's going to help kind of perpetuate that culture forward. And so I think, when you look at, some of these guys that have come in, that Archie's been able to land, I wouldn't underestimate the importance of the player hosts that they've had too. And those guys really doing a good job of selling the program, and the school as well.
Yeah, that's just like anything in sales, right? Sometimes your biggest asset in sales is word of mouth, right? People that you've brought in for whatever business that you have had a good experience. And so if you have kids in your program who have had great experiences or can speak to why they came to your school, and they can, act as an advocate on your behalf and, tell these kids, this is kind of what he told me during recruiting, and this is kind of, how it's been, and they can see that and hear firsthand experience. It's not just the coach telling them, it's the player telling them specifically, he told me he was going to do this, this, and this for me when we got here in terms of, helping me academically, or in terms of, working on my game. And he stayed true to his word. I mean, like I said, these guys talk, they know each other. And I think when you can have players in your program who can really speak to positive experiences, that can only help and enhance your position with a lot of these guys.
Anything else on official visits? I think we pretty much hit all the angles on that.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the next question. This is from Alan.
Hey, Jerod, it's Alan, also known as We're All For You 82. My question is, who do you think will be the first player we see in the gold jersey? Thank you, guys.
So as a reminder, the gold jersey is given to the player who has done the best in practice. And Alex, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they basically quantify all these, everything that goes on in practice. And there is a very objective criteria for kind of ranking players and how productive you are. And the guy who wins that gets to wear the gold jersey. And I think that's on a week by week basis, right? That they award that?
Yeah, usually it just comes out on social media at some point during the week, and we see it, and everyone retweets it or talks about it. So,
yeah. So, who will be the first player? I almost feel like, this question should have. I feel like this question should have the caveat of, outside of Juwan, who do you think would be the first guy in the gold jersey? Because to me, that's the obvious answer, and I think it's the guy that you would want to have it. I mean, I know Romeo is the most talented player. And as we see him play, we all may end up thinking that he is the best player. But Juwan is this team's leader. He's this team's rock. And I think even if Romeo is the best player, Juwan still has the opportunity this year to be the most productive player because of all the many things that he does. I even think sometimes as Indiana fans, we underrate and forget how much he did last year on both ends of the court. I mean, his statistical profile is truly unique in the Big Ten. There was really no player. I mean, Ethan Happ obviously did a lot of things, but didn't have some of the perimeter production that Juwan had, but just so many different things. And so I think number one, that's productivity. That's where the gold jersey is awarded. And I just think you want that guy, your leader, your senior captain, to be the one setting the tone early in practice. So I expect it to be him. I hope that it's him. And I think, if it is, I think that's a great sign that, you've kind of got the hierarchy that you want early in the season, with, your senior captain doing the thing that a senior captain should do. Who do you think will be the first player in the gold jersey, Alex?
I agree with you that I think it will be Juwan Morgan for many of the reasons that you outlined. If it is Devontae Green, I also think it's a good sign because it speaks to the offseason growth that he would have shown if he's able to come out the first week and get that. Because I think more than anyone other player, obviously I think Justin Smith, Romeo, and Juwan are pivotal to this year's success. Outside of those three, Devontae Green to me is the key guy going into the season. And I think he's now an upperclassman. He's got to be a leader on this team. And I think if you're going to be a leader on the court, it starts in practice. And what other way to show that you've been a leader and productive in practice than by getting the gold jersey? So I think it'll be Juwan Morgan, but don't come out of your seats in a bad way if it's Devontae Green, because I think that would also be a very positive development.
Who you would agree, right, that Romeo is the most talented player on this team? That's without question, correct?
I think he might be the most talented player in the Big Ten, not just Indiana. I wrote that in the top 25 list, and I really struggled with the list that Dylan Burkhart of UM Hoops and I did where to put Romeo. We ended up with him sixth, but I wrote in there that I think if we were doing talent, that he's the most talented player in the Big Ten.
Can you reveal where you had him on your personal list? Or do you guys? I think
I had. Well, we did an original list, and then we kind of tweaked it into one. I think I had him somewhere in the 4 to 5 range.
Yeah.
It's so hard to put him over a guy like an Ethan Happ or a Carson Edwards, because as much as he accomplished in high school, doing it at high school and in these all-star games is just totally different than. Mm-hmm. At the Big Ten level. That's why I kind of have a problem with some of these preseason lists of like RJ Barrett as National Player of the Year. That could very well happen, but how do you put him over a guy like a Carson Edwards or an Ethan Happ or Luke May of North Carolina?
It's more exciting and sells magazines better than Ethan Happ.
Exactly. But I would say if I was making a list of most talented players, not on just Indiana's roster, but in the Big Ten, I think Romeo would be at the top.
Also because RJ Barrett goes to Duke, and if Ethan Happ went to Duke, he would be the greatest player in the last 20 years in college basketball. So let's.
Well, he also might be one of the most hated players. Well, he might be one of the most hated players in the Big Ten right now. But let me just say, Ethan Happ. I think every Big Ten fan that doesn't cheer for Wisconsin will be glad that when he is finally gone. But what a case study in maximizing your talents and your abilities, because that guy came out of high school much like Frank Kaminsky, right? Kaminsky is going to go on for the long NBA career. I don't know that Happ ever gets there, but
Kaminsky had a perimeter game. That's the difference.
Exactly. But look at Happ's recruiting profile. Who wanted him? I mean, he redshirted, and now he's. I mean, there's not a night that goes by where you don't think the guy can go out and get 20 and 10. So he's a lot of fun to watch.
All right, let me one bone to pick with you on the list. I'm fine with Carson Edwards and Ethan Happ being 1 and 2. I don't know that I agree with it, but I think it's defensible. I have to argue for Juwan over James Palmer Jr. I just think he's a better overall player. I think James Palmer Jr. is a really good player. He's a really good scorer. He's obviously a very important piece at Nebraska. Clearly one of the top 10 players in the conference, maybe top 5. I don't see him being better than Juwan because I think Juwan does more on the defensive end and just does more across the board than Palmer does. So that was kind of the one quibble in the top 5 that I had.
I think I had Palmer 5 on my list originally. And then I looked at some of his numbers and just kind of what he did last year and projecting ahead. I think Nebraska is obviously going to be a pretty good team this year. I think that was an argument that Dylan won with me. But I think I actually had Cassius Winston maybe 3rd, just based on his ridiculous efficiency numbers, which I don't know how are going to hold up this year without Miles Bridges and Jaren Jackson. But for me, it was those two at the top, pretty clear cut. And after that, you could go in a lot of different directions. I saw Blue Ribbon yesterday had Jordan Murphy on their first team, which I kind of had a problem with because we had him 10th and his efficiency numbers leave a lot to be desired. But, I think anywhere from that 3 to 10 range, there was a lot of debate and argument. So I don't have a problem with that criticism, but overall it'll be interesting at the end of the season. I think we always end up, I think there was a few years back where Nick Stauskas won Big Ten Player of the Year, and we barely had him on the list, or towards the end. Last year, we didn't have Keita Bates-Diop on the list, and he won Big Ten Player of the Year. So what does it mean when
Justin
the season
Smith,
starts?
Big Ten Player of the Year.
There you go.
Okay, but in all seriousness, how close was he to making it? Because he did not make honorable mention, and obviously didn't make the top 25. Was he... and I saw like No Gel Eastern made it, and I kind of thought Justin put more skins on the wall last year than No Gel Eastern.
I think the reason was on that is because kind of projecting ahead to, all right, what's the opportunity, right, at Purdue based on what's the opportunity at Indiana. I mean, Justin Smith, realistically, even if he's a breakout year statistically, or in terms of, the percentage of possessions he's going to use or the percentage of shots he's going to use in the offense, what's maybe his ceiling? What are the numbers that he can put up? Whereas with Eastern,
6, I would say.
Right, exactly. With Eastern, I mean, Carson Edwards could come out and average 20-something a game, but I still think Eastern can probably do, if he plays up to his potential, could be a 13, 14, 15 point a night guy. Or Purdue probably might need him to if they're going to be as good as some people think they are. So I think that was more than anything else. But no, I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the season if Justin Smith was top 20 player in the Big Ten. Wouldn't surprise me at all. It's just kind of looking at the information we have now, and you have two players that you're projecting in the top 6. You're obviously pretty convinced that both of those guys are going to have monster years. So it's really kind of hard to slot somebody else in there, at least objectively, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right, let's move on with the questions. That was just kind of an impromptu. I've realized we hadn't had a chance to discuss it since the list came out. So I had some questions, had some issues. So
there you go.
Thanks for hearing me out.
Yep.
Okay, here is question number 4 from Tom.
Hi, this is Tom Jameson on the Premium Forum. And my question has to do with favorite breakthrough possibility players. I know that question has been asked in the off season, but we've been hearing a lot of information of like Al Durham, for example. So I want to know your top 3 players that you think might have a breakout season this year, and if it's changed throughout this off season. Thank you.
Well, I suppose our last conversation was a nice segue into that, talking about Justin Smith. I think he's the obvious one. I think we both agree with that. We've talked about it many times. He's a guy, I mean, it's almost a cliche at this point, to predict him breaking out. And I think if you just look at what he did over the last, 11, 12 games last year, he was at about, 12 points, 5 rebounds. And I think if he can do that over a full season and have, play better defense, have some more impactful plays, that could be the statistical profile of a breakout season for him. Who, after Justin, Alex, who is the guy that you are maybe most confident in that can be a breakthrough player like Tom asked?
I would say Devontae Green is going to if this team's going to reach its potential, I think he needs to be the answer. But just kind of looking at the opportunity that he has, this is not a team that has a lot of answers at point guard, right? It's going to be Devontae Green, it's going to be Robert Finney, or it's going to be Al Durham. Of those 3 guys, which one do I have the most confidence in for this season? Can take a to kind of take the reins of the team and be a really productive player, I would go with Devontae Green. But the tough thing about picking a breakout guy, like I said in the last question or the last discussion, is there's just not going to be, in terms of statistics, I don't think a huge opportunity for a guy to come kind of out of nowhere and put up numbers. For Devontae, I think the key numbers that I'm going to be looking at is his 3-point shooting, his assist and turnover rate, and how he defends. So if he can do all those things better than he did a year ago and show good decision making and good leadership on the court, then I would classify that as kind of a breakout for him.
Yeah, Devontae is another guy, and I've talked about him a lot on this show and on the Assembly Call. And I think Archie's recent comments on the John Rothstein podcast, kind of, keep the momentum going a little bit, that this has been a good offseason for Devontae, and Archie, sounds encouraged by what he's seen from Devontae. Let me throw out two more names. One is the name that I mentioned earlier, Evan Fitzner. And, I think we think of breakout guys. We typically think of a guy who's already been here and kind of established a baseline. So we have to kind of go off what he did at St. Mary's. But I think even if he has a similar statistical profile to what he did at St. Mary's, which would be, play 15 to 18 minutes a game, be a guy who is a solid defensive rebounder, albeit, maybe not the greatest defender, but then be able to step out and knock down 40+% from downtown. Indiana really needs someone to replace Robert Johnson's 3-point production. And Robert shot 37.7% last year. I think he made 66 threes. I mean, he was, by far the most productive 3-point shooter. And someone's going to have to step into that role. No, I don't know if Evan will get enough attempts, to fully replace what Robert Johnson did, but he's a guy that you can pretty safely pencil in for 40% because he's been doing it his entire career. He's done it for 3 seasons. And he certainly stands to get a lot of open looks given the attention that will be paid to Romeo Langford and to Juwan Morgan. And if Devontae Green can be a more solid playmaker and, use some of the extra space he should have, then he should be able to find, Evan wide open a lot too. So I think Evan Fitzner will have the opportunity, along with, Deron Davis being hurt and us not really knowing when he'll be back. And I think more and more kind of what you hear, I would not be shocked if Evan starts at the beginning of the season. I certainly think he'll be a key piece of the rotation. The other guy who I think has a chance to break out is Zach McRoberts. And I think he's a guy that we overlook and maybe don't necessarily think about as a breakout candidate. Part of that is because he's just so consistent. You kind of know what you're going to get from him, and you're not really expecting a huge ceiling. You're not really expecting a huge floor in any particular game. You're just expecting Zach McRoberts things. And that's why he's played so much for 2 years, because his coaches felt the same way on a roster that's been so inconsistent. It's like you look down the bench. It's like, who do you know that what you're going to get from a certain guy? Well, let's put Zach in. At least we know what we're going to get from him. But the reason why I think there's a potential for a breakout is because, he's a sneakily decent 3-point shooter. I think he was, around 39% last year. Again, limited attempts, not a ton of attempts. But if he's gained some confidence and if he's ready to pull the trigger more when he gets wide open looks, and he will get wide open looks because the spacing will be better, there's going to be more talent on the floor with him. And so if he's in the right spots, which he usually is, he'll get good looks. If he's ready to take them, he's a guy whose 3-point production could go up too. And he could become a guy who makes, 1.5 3-pointers a game, if he has enough minutes, because we know he's going to play the defense. And this is still a program in transition, to where I think Archie, especially early in the season, is going to want him on the court because of the tone that he sets. So he's not the sexiest name, but I think if he can improve his offensive production, by 20%, 30%, most of which can just come by standing outside and knocking down some threes in addition to the hustle plays, I think he's another guy who isn't going to break out into being an all Big Ten type player, but really could be a more productive player for this team than what we've seen. And really, just be another key cog in this Indiana team getting better and fulfilling Juwan Morgan's guarantee of making the NCAA tournament. What do you think of those two?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that kind of pops up when I think of both of those guys is just how wide open they're going to be, right, on the perimeter, because everyone's going to be focused on Romeo and Juwan. If those guys can just knock down 40% of their wide open looks, and that's truly what it's going to be on the perimeter for both of them, I think they're definitely more than capable of producing what you described. So I've got no beef with either of those picks. The thing that when you look at this roster, the depth just has a chance to be really, really significant. It's something we've talked about in previous years, and could Indiana actually go 8, 9, 10 deep? And we always talk about it in the preseason. It never materializes. We'll see how it goes this year, but at least on paper, it feels like this is a team that really has a chance to have really good depth.
Significant to the point of potentially being problematic. And Archie
Right.
kind of alluded to that in the podcast with John Rothstein, that's going to be, the biggest challenge is guys accepting that they may not, get the role exactly that they want, that they may have to sacrifice a little bit for the greater good. But that is definitely a good problem to have as opposed to the flip side, which we've seen the last couple of years. All right, let's go on to question number 5 here. This is from TJ21.
This is TJ21 from the Premium Forum on Inside the Hall. Of these 5 guys, who do you think is most likely to contribute the most and the soonest? Thompson, Hunter, Forrester, Anderson, or Moore? Thanks. Bye-bye.
Interesting that these aren't names that we've really brought up a whole lot on the show. So, who's most likely to contribute? Race Thompson, Jerome Hunter, Jake Forrester, Demezi Anderson, and Clifton Moore, who's easy to forget simply because he didn't play a lot last year, but here's a skilled 6'10" guy who now has a full year in the program, a year to mature his body, to mature his mind, and be more ready for the college game. Who do you like out of those 5 to contribute the most and contribute the soonest? And maybe those are the same guy, maybe it's different for each one.
Well, the 2 that come to mind immediately, and I'll be interested to see if this is the same 2 or one of the 2 that you would pick. Obviously, Jerome Hunter's on there. I think he's a talent that's going to come in and maybe not get starters minutes right away, but I think he's going to be a rotation guy. The other one I would say is Race Thompson, because I think that redshirt year for him and just being able to see him in person back with D1 Minnesota on the grassroots level, he was a guy that knew how to play. He's not the tallest kid, I think 6'7", 6'8", but he can shoot the ball from the perimeter. He's got a really good feel for the game. And those are the 2 guys that I would say kind of fit the description of what TJ is looking for there. If I had to go with one, I would say Race Thompson, because I think physically he's going to be more ready to contribute right away. But neither one of those guys would. It won't surprise me if either one of them is in the rotation from day one. Clifton Moore, to me, just feels like there's too many questions to answer. Who are the other ones? Demezi Anderson, I think he's going to be capable of contributing from an offensive standpoint. Defensively, I think he's going to have a ways to go. And Jake Forrester is another one where you just kind of wonder if he can crack that top 8 or 9. And at this point, I'm not ready to take the leap that he would. So I would say Race Thompson and Jerome Hunter would be my top 2 on that list.
Yeah, I would say that Race is most likely to contribute soonest, certainly because of the extra year that he's had in the program and the opportunity based on his position and Deron Davis, maybe not being ready to go right from the beginning of the season, but, contribute most over the course of the season. I would pick Jerome for a lot of the same reasons that you said. It may just take him a little while, kind of like Justin Smith last year. He was a guy, ranked a little bit higher than Justin in the recruiting rankings. But you remember, Justin had some good moments early and had some moments where he looked, kind of lost. And I remember Archie talking about how he came back from Christmas break, with a renewed, focus and really was ready to go. And he had that big game against Minnesota, and that, kind of presaged some real development from him over the second half of the season. So I would not be surprised if the arc of Jerome Hunter's season is similar to what we saw from Justin Smith last year. And what's interesting about those other 3 guys is it's a lot easier for me right now to envision Jake Forrester and Demezi Anderson contributing than Clifton Moore. But part of that is simply because, we've seen more of Clifton Moore and kind of seen him struggle a little bit. And so it's hard to shake that and remember the upside, remember the skills. And right now we just haven't seen Forrester and Anderson. I look at those 2 guys and I say to myself, well, here are 2 guys that have really particular skills that could get them on the court, right? Demezi Anderson is a really good shooter. And look, sometimes you need shooting. And so that could get him on the court. Jake Forrester is a guy who plays with a lot of energy and knows how to be a role player, which I think is an underrated understanding for a high school player to have, because so many guys come into college from being the top player on their high school team. And he wasn't that guy. He played with other great players. He knows how to fill a role. And so I think that gives those guys the opportunity to play, but other parts of their game still need so much development that they may not be able to crack the deep rotation. So, and with Clifton, it's just, will the skills be able to outshine the limitations? And it's just hard based on what we saw last year to focus on the skills over the limitations. So we'll have to see with those three guys, but Race and Jerome are the two guys I'm most confident in because of their talent, and then just because of that extra year that Race has. Any final thoughts on that one?
No, I think you hit most of the key points there. So those are all guys that'll be interesting to see how they do on Saturday as well.
So if you're not part of the Inside the Hall Premium Forum, go to forum.insidethehall.com. I don't know that we'll always keep, the mailbag as a premium forum thing, but for right now, it is. So just another perk of being a member in there. But, if you want great Indiana basketball conversation throughout the season, that is the place to go, forum.insidethehall.com. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be up at Hoosier Hysteria. So if you were there, please, come up, say hi, send me a note on Twitter at Assembly Call. I always love, meeting face to face the people who listen to our shows. So I'd love to get a chance to meet you, to meet as many of you as possible while I'm up there. And Alex, it's going to be good to see you. We don't get too many opportunities to see each other face to face, so I look forward to seeing you up at Hoosier Hysteria as well.
Same, Jerod. I'm definitely looking forward to this weekend. It's been a long, as we've discussed many times, a long off season, yes. Longer than usual, based on the fact that Indiana didn't make the postseason last year, and the fact that the Big Ten tournament was moved up so much. I think the season was over March 1st last year, which is a long time to write about things other than basketball games for a whole off season. So we're finally going to have something to write about in terms of what we've actually seen from this team, which I'm excited about. And like you said, excited to just to be around the fans again, be in that building. I think the energy is going to be incredible, and looking forward to meeting up with you as well. So looking forward to a fun weekend, and hopefully, the season will be right around the corner from right now. So it should be a fun year.
Absolutely. We will be back. Oh, and just a reminder, if you can't be at Hoosier Hysteria, if you can be there, doors open at 4. No, doors open at 2. Event starts at 4. Bring a canned good. The parking lot's open at 12:30. If you can't be there live, you can get a BTN Plus subscription. You'll also need a BTN Plus subscription in November to watch the exhibition game against Southern Indiana and the game against UC Davis. So they're going to get you for 2 months this year. But that's how you watch it. We'll have a post-event show over at the Assembly Call, and then, Alex, next week, I assume you and I will be right back here for Podcast on the Brink to react to what we saw at Hoosier Hysteria, any recruiting news that comes out of it, any big moments that come out of it, kind of what our impressions were in person. I imagine that's what we'll talk about next week on Podcast on the Brink, and we'll have a new episode of Podcast on the Brink every week for the foreseeable future as we move through the offseason and into the season. So looking forward to it. And we'll talk to you, some of you at Hoosier Hysteria, and everybody else, we'll talk to you on next week's new episode. Until then, take care. Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. To get more from me and from Alex, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana University basketball. If you liked this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or family member who loves IU basketball as much as you do. You can also support the show by leaving a rating and review on iTunes, which helps us get the word out to more IU fans like yourself. We will be back next week with a new episode. Until then, as always, go Hoosiers.